Alright, we are back in the garage, getting ready to put the drivetrain back in the Corvette. Let's look at the box of goodies I got here from Texas Drivetrain Performance. Those guys continue to impress me. I always order my differential stuff from them. The clutches and the springs and everything. So this time I went and I wanted to get a lightweight flywheel since I was using the really heavy LS6 stuff. So I ordered this from Texas Drivetrain. This is their diamond clutch setup with a lightweight flywheel. And as always, I've had this open already, took all the packing out, but they had it packed just beautiful. There was no damage. Everything, it was just packed really well. And I ordered it on a Sunday and it showed up at my doorstep on the following Wednesday. So they got it shipped out super fast. Now here is the new slave cylinder. We've got the kit of stuff here for the torque tube if I need it. We've got the shim pack so we can make sure to get the slave cylinder shimmed up properly. Because where the LS6 is a self-adjusting flywheel, this is not. So we want to make sure the gap is right when we put it together. And that was the pressure plate. I went with the standard, I think it's a Kevlar clutch disc. I like to have good clutch adjustment, or engagement. I've used the puck clutches before, really on and off clutch feel, didn't really care for that. As long as this holds, this will be great. And then the main performance part is the billet steel lightweight flywheel. And it is a really lightweight flywheel, like 15 pounds. You could use this as a frisbee, where you could use the LS6 one as a boat anchor. It's all billet, all one piece. The ring gear is built into it. So we're going to put this on, see how I like it. If I don't like, I've ran lightweight flywheels before in other vehicles. You just have to get used to giving it more throttle as you take off, because you don't have as much inertia. But with the LS6, it always seemed like the engine was just a little sluggish right off idle. So hopefully this livens it up. Okay, finally made it under the car. We're going to put the flywheel on. I did do a check, stuck the flywheel up there. You can get the bell housing on with the flywheel in place. So that will make it quite a bit easier to get the flywheel torque down. First thing we need to do is I'm going to wipe this down with solvent, blow out all the bolt holes, make sure all your bolts are clean. Make sure the back of the flywheel is totally clean where it bolts up to the crank. And then we'll get it up there in place. Okay, we got all the surfaces cleaned. And I'm going to go in and stick the flywheel on. Your oddball hole there lines up with the hole in the crank. Now, the threads in the crank go all the way through, so you need some kind of sealant. I always use a generous amount of blue Loctite. Whatever sealant you want, you got to have something on there. You can have oil seeping down the threads, and that would be bad for the clutch. They just bumped them on there to pull the flywheel up on the crank. Need to torque them in 3 steps, crisscrossing as you go. First step's 15 foot-pounds, then 37 foot-pounds, then 74. So let's get that torque down. Last step is 74. And I'll switch torque wrenches for that. Okay, that was the final pass at 74 foot-pounds. So the flywheel is on. Now, just out of curiosity, I went ahead and hung the pressure plate up there just to see if I could get the bell housing on with the pressure plate on. I didn't figure there was any chance. But you know what? If you turn that just a little bit with that engine, you know, it's tilted back. I might be able to go back another 1/4 of an inch, but it's pretty close to as far down as you can get it, because the head will start getting into your air conditioner lines. But with it right there, that bell housing will fit on just fine with the pressure plate and clutch already in there. So that makes it so much easier. So instead of having to roll it around to get to the bolts at the bottom, you can just work your way around like a normal clutch. So this is going to be a lot easier. So right now, need to make sure this is completely clean, no oil, no fingerprints, no nothing. Same deal with your pressure plate. Anything that's on there, you can end up with a clutch slip. So I'm going to wipe that down with solvent, hit it with compressed air, and then we'll start putting the pressure plate on. Okay, we got everything cleaned up. We're going to start putting this in place. Keep your greasy fingers off of your clutch disc surface. When you put this up there, you'll notice one side in the middle is kind of raised up with the spring assembly. The other side is flat. Flat side goes against the flywheel. If you try to put it the other way, this is going to hit the flywheel. It won't seat. If you do somehow manage to get it all bolted in there, it's not going to disengage. Set it up in place. Take your alignment tool. And I use just the regular plastic alignment tool. Some people don't like it because they don't think it lines very good, but I'll show you a little trick on it. And you shouldn't have any trouble. Okay, now we got to get the pressure plate up there. Okay, you'll notice you've got alignment pins, opposite sides, and they're right next to a couple of the bolt holes. So you got to make sure you can't get this 180 out because the pins are on the same side. Looking at it this way, bolt hole pin on the left, bolt hole pin on the left. So make sure your pressure plate is lined up the same way. Get that up there, get it on the pin. The other side on the pin. And get some bolts started. And these bolts have the ones I've got have a serrated surface under the top of the head to hold them in place. I still put a little blue Loctite on them. Just because you don't want this coming loose. Okay, I got 2 bolts in. Now the trick to getting these to line up right is that's just hanging by the plate right now. Just hanging by the alignment tool. You want to, see you've got some play. Now if you just stuck it up there with that hanging there, it's not going to be right. So you kind of got to feel in between the alignment tool and the fingers and get that plate centered up. Once you do that, I'm going to put just a little bit of torque. Now I'm going to put one more bolt up top. Where'd that go? There it is. And that should hold it in place. Yeah, I can't move the plate anymore. Work your fingers around it. And then make sure it goes in and out smoothly. If it does, she's pretty much lined up and you shouldn't have any trouble stabbing the torque tube in there. We'll go ahead and get all 6 bolts in. Now you want to tighten these a little bit at a time. It said like 4 passes. Didn't give a torque spec for each pass because you're pulling the pressure plate down on the disc. We'll just work it a little bit at a time in a star pattern. I'm going to go ahead and take this out because it's in my way. Okay, all the bolts are snugged down. Went back and forth all around. The pressure plate is now up against the flywheel, so I'll check this again. Slides right in. Nice fit. So that's good. So now we'll finish torquing them all down in sequence. I found 2 different torque specs. I have a generic list of C5 torque specs. It called for 47 foot-pounds. And then I went and looked up some specific stuff for a 2004. It called for 52. So I'm going to go with 52 on this, but whatever your particular year calls for, I'd go with that. Okay, that is on. Next up, we'll slip the bell housing up in place. Hopefully it fits like it did before. Oh yeah, not a problem. Gotta get it on the pins. One pin. Second pin. Perfect. Now see, working through the hole, you could torque the flywheel no problem, but doing this, you'd have to roll it around and around and around to tighten those bolts, which is doable, but it's just not as easy as the way I just did it. So let me go out and get the bolts. We'll get this bolted up. Those bolts were a little hard to get to still. So I guess it would depend on whether you like pulling bell housing bolts or rolling that around to tighten the clutch. Either way, you got options. Okay, now that we got the clutch in, we need to get the torque tube to where I want it. First thing we need to do is pull the old slave cylinder off. That's easy to do, just 2 bolts. If you'll notice, this slave cylinder still had the original style bleeder on it. With my headers, it's not too bad if you have the exhaust off. Still got to take the tunnel plate off, but you can reach up there and get to the bleeder screw. Now, with different style headers, like when I was working on my daughter's car, it was a pain to get to it. So on this go around, I am going to put the remote bleeder in so it will be up in the engine bay when I go to bleed stuff. I didn't do it before because there was a bunch of stuff in the way and it was just one more thing in there, but I've taken so much stuff out that now I don't mind having the extra line going up in there, and it will be real handy. But I took those 2 bolts out. This slides off. This one, the hydraulics were good, but the bearing is, it's not bad, but it's not perfect. So we're going to put a new one in. Okay, next we just take off the ring of bolts holding this housing onto the transmission, and then we'll slide it apart. Okay, it's all unbolted. There are a couple of pins that lined it up, and they tend to hang up a little bit. So tap those loose. Put a couple of blocks to the front of the transmission to support it. Then with a little wiggling, it should come off. All right, everything looks good. Bearings feel good, but I still want to pull the insides out to check the couplers, because they are original. Because when I had it out before, they looked fine, looked like new. Left them in there. So we're going to check them again while we got it out now. Now, since this is the later model torque tube, the innards come apart with a big snap ring right here. Now, if it was the earlier models, they have a ring of bolts you take out. But we got the snap ring. There we go. Snap ring's out. Now you should be able to tap on the other end with a mallet and just drive this whole assembly out. And out comes your drive shafts. Now I brought it outside so I could get a good look at it. And I'm still not changing the couplers. They look perfect. I have a set on the shelf of nice German couplers, but I'm not going to put them in. Well, my battery ran down, so I had to do a little charging. While I was doing that, cleaned off the top of the transmission, got it a little spit shine. Went ahead and put the drive shaft back in the torque tube. Like I showed before, all the bearings were good, the couplers were good. It's the same as taking it out. You just slide it in there, tap it into place, and put the big snap ring in. Well, I spent quite a bit of time measuring and shimming the slave cylinder for the new clutch. And as soon as I put everything together, put the transmission torque tube in the car, had the wife run the clutch, I took it all back out and got rid of most of the shims. And I said I had never shimmed a clutch before. I went and watched a lot of videos, went into Monster Clutch's website, read their way of doing it, which they're all pretty much the same as far as how they do it. But I did not like the end result, don't see the reason for it. And so I went and changed it all out. So I'm not including any video of shimming the clutch. There's lots of good videos on YouTube if you want to shim the clutch, but I'm going to show you why I really didn't care for it. Here's the old slave cylinder out of the car. And these cylinders have, you know, a certain amount of travel. With this just mounted on the front of the torque tube, it will be just like it is now, extended. Okay, you bolt up the torque tube, pull it into the bell housing, and on the transmission, the fingers will touch the bearing and will push this back a certain amount. And then when you step on the clutch pedal to disengage it, it extends. Okay? Well, the way the shimming works is you're trying to get the slave cylinder to be almost bottomed out to like within 1 to 200 thousandths of being all the way in. Because you need to leave a little bit of space, because as a clutch wears, the fingers extend further out of the pressure plate and will push it back even further. So you don't want it totally bottomed out, obviously. You got to have it a little bit. So I took all these measurements and I came out with needing like 1/4 inch of shims. And I thought that sounded like a crazy amount of shims, but then I go look it up and it's not unusual to need that much. In fact, there's several of the companies that will make you a shim to go in there that's whatever thickness you want. Get you some longer bolts and you're all set to go. But I don't really see the point, because I had it shimmed back so it had the space at the bottom of the travel. But I had the wife step on the clutch and you know it comes out a ways and you still had all of this sticking out the front. So I took most of the shims out. I had like over 1/4 inch of shims in there, and I think I left 80 thousandths worth of shim left. So now when you push it and the thing is all the way extended, I can look up in there and see probably that much of it sticking out, that much of the shaft. And it's not going to go any further. I mean, that's fully disengaged. As the clutch wears, it will push back on it. So I just don't see the reason to have it all jammed up like this. And there's a couple of reasons I don't like that. Number one is this spring holds the bearing up against the clutch fingers. And the further you get it back, the more pressure it pushes against the clutch fingers. And you don't need it pressed up against the fingers hard. In fact, you don't need it touching them at all. On a fork style clutch, they will actually move back and not be touching at all. So I didn't like that. The second reason I didn't like it is that these shims fit on the back like so. But the problem is, when I was needing that much shim, see this lip here? That actually fits up against the front of the torque tube and centers this. Make sure it doesn't move around. When you had that much shims, it no longer centered it, so you were relying on getting it perfectly centered, then tightening down the bolts. Didn't care for that. And when you have a custom shim made, they will generally make it to where it has a lip on the shim and then it will fit down in here. So that will center up, but if you stack the regular flat ones in there, it won't. And the third problem was that when you put the clutch in there, your lines fit into half moon cutouts on your bell housing and your torque tube. And that centers them pretty much in that hole that those two half moons cut out. Well, with a 1/4 inch of shim in there, it was moving this forward and was actually getting the front edge of that into the bell housing to where it was rubbing up against it. I'm not sure exactly how much it was pushing back on, but it was definitely contacting. So I didn't like the way it was set up, and I just don't see the reason you need to run it back this way. Because, I mean, every other clutch I've had used more of the outer portion of the travel instead of down like this, and they have always worked fine. And if there's something I'm missing here, add it in the comments, but I've watched it. You can see up through the bottom of the bell housing. You can watch the throwout bearing work when you're running the clutch, and there's no reason it won't work the way I've got it set up. So back to putting the drivetrain back in. And last thing I want to do before I put this in the car is to install my new remote bleeder. So first step, we will take out the original factory bleeder. Next up, the end of this bleeder. The way it comes has a copper washer right there. Instructions say to take it off. And the copper washer goes on the other side, in between this fitting and the slave cylinder. Put some blue thread locker on there because we do not want this coming loose. So then we got to pull everything out. That's one reason I never used these before. Didn't want to have to do that. And we'll put that on there. Tighten that down secure. And I'm focused on the wrong thing. Sorry. Then this fitting screws on there. And then tighten that fitting down. And that will run up, and in the engine bay, you will have this to where you complete it in the engine bay. Want to lube the splines up a little bit. Put some high temp grease on it. Just the finest coating. I usually smear it on there, then wipe it off with a rag because you don't want anything slinging off and getting on your clutch. And we'll give the splines on this a good coat of grease because there's no clutch to worry about. Now we're going to slide this back together. Get it bolted together because it's easier for me doing this by myself to have the transmission up on the jack to where I can use it to control the back. And then I can work at the front, getting everything lined up. And now I'm going to roll this in from the back and we'll see if I can get it put together. Make sure this thing stays up out of the way. Because if it gets jammed up, you'll have to unjam it. It's pulled in here a little closer. That up some more. Slide it forward a little. There, we're getting there. And now I need to raise the transmission a little bit. All right, let's see if we can stab this thing in there. I'm gonna work it forward. Turn the drive shaft till the splines engage. There the splines went. So now, let's figure out what we need to do as far as angle. It looks like the motor needs to come down slightly. Since I don't have somebody at the other end pushing, sometimes use a C-clamp there on the bottom. Just be careful. Don't put very much tension on it. You might end up breaking the bell housing or something. And it's easing together. Put just a little preload on it and then wiggle it. It slides in a little more. The pins are in. It's almost up together. I'm not exactly sure when I knocked the camera over, but it did slide together. Got it bolted in, so that's all done. Tomorrow we will probably go ahead and put, well, we still got to put the bottom cover on there. Tomorrow we'll probably go ahead and get the Driveline on the back, get the cradle put in, that sort of thing. Just keep working on the Driveline. All right, that's all for today. Catch you on the next video. Thanks for watching.